Yeah, I think we can start.
Great. I'll share my screen. Just let me confirm what I'm sharing. Okay,
Yeah.
the full screen. Okay, perfect. So this, again, welcome to everybody. Thank you for being here. This is a joint action between Silvanus and FireUrisk under the support of FireLog, of course. As we do have in FireUrisk, there is an activity that brings, in order to bring together other European projects, and in this is Great Assistance FireLog, in order to share our results, before that to share our research, our steps, and our thoughts. So previous years we had more, we did some other webinars along with other projects. So this time is with Silvanus. This is the first one out of 2 of webinars. We have named them under the title Managing and Living with Wildfires in Europe, Highlights on Integrated Wildfire Risk Management from FireUrisk and Silvanus EU Horizon projects. This first webinar is going to be a presentation of the main achievements of both projects. And we're going to start with Professor Villegas, our coordinator, and present on behalf of FireUrisk a bit of an introduction. Then the main results are going to be presented by our our technical director, Emilio Chuvienga Salinero, member of the steering committee. Then we're going to follow with the presentation from Silvanus, and on behalf of Silvanus would be the technical director, I think, Krishna Chandamuri. And then we'll follow for the questions. That's the agenda we form for today. Now, just a bit of heads up. We have another webinar coming up on next Friday, on the 14th of February, with lots of love to everybody due to the day. If you haven't signed up yet, please, there is a QR code, but also you can find it on our social media. It's quite different, which we're going to discuss about land management strategies and the fuels as part of the integrated fire management approach. We have a big agenda, guests discussing about it, saying their experience, their case studies from Greece and Portugal. It's going to be a very interesting webinar. Please join us and spread the word around. Now, some parts from us, please use the Q&A button for your questions, as at the end of the webinar, we're going to read them through. Any other good mornings, good afternoons, or any issues you may have with the sound, with the audio, with the video, just put them in the chat. That will make our life a bit easier looking for the questions. And thank you for being here. As we are reaching towards, I'm sure Professor Villegas will say it, but we're reaching towards the end of completion of our project. We're gonna more webinars coming up, many publications, many results that we want to show you, we want to share with everybody. So please, if you haven't done already, follow us on social media, and also keep an eye on our webinar on our website for upcoming webinars and other events. Now, I want to welcome Professor Domingo Villegas, our coordinator from the University of Coimbra, to say a few words about the project and these actions. Thank you. And thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Clelia. I now share my screen. And Okay. I'd like to thank Clelia. She is the leader of the dissemination activities in the Fire Risk Project. She's organizing these networking events, in this case with Silvanus. And I'd like also to greet, in particular, our colleagues from Silvanus for providing us this opportunity to share our work and our knowledge. And as Clelia already mentioned, we are in the final months of the project, both projects as well. And this is one of the initiatives that we are taking to highlight some of the outcomes of our projects. As you certainly know, those of you that have been following the Fire Risk Project, its title is Developing a Holistic Risk-Wise Strategy for Wildfire Management. And that's what we try to do during these 4 years almost now. Fire Risk has a large consortium with about 38 partners from 18 countries. You can see them. We are scattered all over Europe and also other parts of the world, but we are also a consortium composed by different sorts of institutions with different scientific background, different disciplines. Ours is mainly a research project, but we joined the project was managed by, let's say, different boards. One of the boards is the steering committee, composed by these 4 persons. And I was very fortunate to have the support of my colleagues to manage such a large consortium and such a, I'd say, complex and ambitious work program. We will have today Emilio Chuvieco, and also in other meetings we'll also meet our colleagues, George Eftikidis and Ioannis Gitas, who are managing the project. Of course, many other colleagues have been working in the different other work packages and activities that I mentioned briefly. The project objectives were mainly these 3 or 4 that are in this slide. First, to look at the risk assessment, wildfire risk assessment, to analyze it, let's say, more completely, to go beyond what is classically considered the meteorological conditions, but the risk is much more than that. And then, on the basis of the risk assessment, see how we can reduce the current fire risk conditions, what measures can be taken to reduce, and then also look at the future conditions that we will have, namely due to climate change, to socioeconomic changes that are expected, and so what we should do, because the management of wildfire is not the same thing now as it was 20 years ago, and it will be 20 years from now. And all of this we intended to do in an integrated form, let's say, not to see each aspect separately, but to work with all of them together, because they are part of a whole process. And that's why we try to look at this risk assessment, risk reduction, risk adaptation. So the different phases or processes that are normally considered in wildfire management, for example, prevention, intervention, recovery, in an integrated way. So this was a very great effort that we did throughout the project, and I think we somehow managed to do this. This is again the let's say picture of the diagram of the project. Since the beginning, we wanted to look at these different aspects of risk, not only the danger, but also the resilience, exposure, and to look to other risks that can be triggered by wildfires. And we were encouraged to do this in connection with the stakeholders, with the citizens and other scientists as well, to learn more about the situations. One of the outcomes of the project, which took us quite a lot of effort, was the presentation proposal of this diagram that is, let's say, a link of all aspects of variables that compose the wildfire risk. And we tried in our research project, of course, to look at each one of these connections to see how the different parameters at different scales of both space and time would affect the ignition of fires, the propagation of fire, and therefore the danger. And we looked at the main assets, their exposure, their vulnerability, and putting all this together to evaluate the risk of wildfire. I know that Emilio will speak more in detail on this, but I would like to bring this as a very important result of the project, and I think that this is a sort of a map guideline that we can all follow, we should all follow in research, because our aim as researchers is to understand all these processes. Of course, we are not able to learn and understand all of them, but it is our aim. In the project, we had this structure, different work packages. On the left side, you see 3 more technical work packages dedicated to each one of those objectives that I mentioned. On the right side, we see the pilot sites and demonstration and the policy and dissemination activities. And all these activities were put together in a multi-level integration that we try to achieve all over the project. This diagram is now becoming superfluous because we are exactly in the last 2 months from the project, and the project will end in the end of March. So we are in the final stages of the project. We did our demonstration of the results and the products at different scales, more or less at a local scale, or in what we call the demonstration areas. So small areas in each of the main countries involved. And then we had 5 pilot sites, 3 of them in the south of Europe, the Mediterranean region, 2 in the central and north Europe, and the 5th one was the whole European territory. We considered it as a test basis for our concepts and for our products, because we were encouraged to look at the problem at different scales, not only at the local or regional scale, but also at national and even at international scale, because the problem of wildfires, as you know, has no borders, and we wanted to look at it in these all aspects. So these were the different scales in which we addressed the project. And during these last 2 years, we made a great effort to identify the main products of the project and to show them to different stakeholders in all these pilot sites and at the European scale. And with this, I end my presentation, and I give the floor to Professor Emilio Chuvieco, who is the scientific coordinator of the project, and I ask him to present the main outcomes of the project. Emilio, please.
Thank you, Domingos. Well, thank you all for attending this webinar, and thank you also to Clelia for organizing it. Yes, as Domingos was saying, after presenting the general structure of fire risk, I'm going to give some insights of the main outputs that we obtained from the project. The project is close to an end. It has been a 4-year project, so there has many different activities and deliverables, but just to summarize what I think would be the most relevant aspects or the most innovative aspect, this is the list, let's say, that I will try to present in the next slides. We develop a new holistic framework of fire risk assessment, including the different aspects that Domingos was just presenting. We generate a new fuel type classification system that is scale independent and includes different aspects of fire risk, not just the propagation, but also the characterization of emissions and other aspects. And it could be applied, it has been applied actually to the European territory and different pilot sites. We also generate methods to obtain fuel parameters from satellite data, a new scheme for vulnerability assessment, including socioeconomic and ecological aspects. We develop exposure based on well and urban interface mapping at the European territory and also for the pilot sites. Analysis of large fire events occurring in Europe in 21, 22, and 23, and that has been published by the Joint Research Center. We also analyze scenarios of different landscape mitigation strategies, considering three main conditions: herbivory, mechanical reduction, and prescribed fire. We also do estimate future fire risk conditions coming from climate and land use models with different scenarios. And we try to implement all these integrated risk index for proposing different mitigation strategies. And finally, we are working now on the development of a new holistic framework for fire risk management. As Domingos was saying, our study sites include two different scales, one covering the whole European territory, and in this case, the European end users would be the target, particularly EFIS, which is handling the fire risk assessment for all the member states. And also at more detailed resolution, we are working with 5 pilot sites, 3 in the Mediterranean areas, 1 in the Central and another one in Northern Europe, and also 26 demonstration areas, which are mostly for developing particular methodologies of specific variables within the fire risk scheme. This is the general scheme that we developed for the project. Again, as Domingos was saying, includes 3 main aspects: danger, exposure, and vulnerability. You may know most operational systems are basically working with danger aspects and mostly with emission, estimating emission from natural aspects, from weather data mostly. This scheme, danger, exposure, and vulnerability, has been developed by the 3 main work packages, the technical work packages, one dealing with the assessment of current conditions, the other one analyzing the different factors that are more relevant in this risk estimation to reduce or mitigate the risk conditions, and finally the analysis of future conditions that would lead us to prepare adaptation plans. Particularly, this is a concern in Central and Northern Europe, in which climate models prevent that we have higher impacts of fires than current. The work package 4 aims to integrate all these aspects, including the development of a dedicated platform with different visualization tools, and also a wiki with the variables that are part of this conceptual development scheme. We also have a work package for demonstration studies in different pilot sites and demonstration areas, and finally a work package on dissemination, which is part of what we are doing today. The general scheme of fire risk integration that was developed in the first phase of the project, it was published in an open access journal in May 2023, so it's almost 1 year and a half since it was published. And as you know, it has been very well received by the community. It has already 44 citations and more than 14,000 article views. That means that the scheme could be that our purpose actually was trying to help the community in standardizing the concepts and the variables that need to be taken into account, going beyond the standard assessment of risk condition, which are basically relying on just weather variables, which are obviously very important, but it's only part of the story. Here are some examples of the variables that were developed for this different the scheme that I just showed. One of the aspects was the modeling the emission for the European territory. In this case, we developed a model based on machine learning algorithms that relies on the historical occurrence of fire. In this case, this historical occurrences, we don't have a standardized fire database for the whole European territory. We rely mostly on on burn area derived from satellite observation. And that was, the starting base for the historical analysis. So basically, we're aiming to more medium and large fires because of the satellite resolution of this burn area dataset. We made a great effort to define an integrated integrated fuel type characterization system that would be suitable for different spatial scales and also for different purposes, not just for fire propagation, but also for other aspects of fire risk conditions like vulnerability, for instance, or emissions. We developed the classification system, and also we developed the fuel map covering the whole European territory based on existing cartographical databases and bioclimatic models. The original classification system is a hierarchical one. We couldn't go with this level of detail to the understory fuels, but at least we were able to characterize the crown fuels and the shrubs and grass, let's say. And all these categories were converted to standardized fuel models using the Scott and Burger classification to be used for fire potential propagation based on behave and flame up, so the standard equations of fuel propagation. For doing that, also we work on other satellite systems that would facilitate a quantitative estimation of parameters, of forest parameters that are quite important for modeling crown fires. So using LiDAR, satellite LiDAR sensors called GDI, plus machine learning interpolation techniques, we were able to derive the forest canopy height, the forest canopy cover, the forest canopy base height, the crown bulk density, and that again are necessary inputs of fire behavior propagation potential. Also using satellite data, but different sensors, we estimate live fuel moisture content of shrubs, trees, and grass every 8 days using Sentinel-3, which is part of the Copernicus Earth Observation Program of the European Union. This weather information plus fuel types, fuel models, plus topography, plus live fuel moisture content was able to estimate fire propagation potential. Again, we use in this case the standard equations of surface and crown fuels, current fire propagation potential, and considering the fire line intensity, we derive fire propagation potential assuming certain intervals to which different suppression means can be obtained. That is based on a standard thresholds defined by the U.S. Forest Service. So we convert this fire line intensity. In this case, obviously, we are not aiming to model single fires, I mean, the propagation of a single fire, but rather the potential of propagation, meaning that in case of having a fire anywhere in Europe at 1 square kilometer resolution, we could estimate the fire line intensity, the rate of spread, the flame lengths, etc. These are the standard outputs of fire behavior models. This part of the, again, ignition and propagation, then we mentioned briefly the exposure. Exposure, we were discussing about what components should be considered within exposure, which would be the people and resources potentially affected by fire. And at the end, we decided just to focus on the areas where wild and urban interface occurs. So where vegetation means houses, basically in the suburban areas. We also analyze the potential of using smoke dispersion models for that. But at the end, we decided to focus on this variable for the European territory, even though the smoke dispersion was used for analysis at the pilot site level. In terms of vulnerability, which is a component that is regularly not very commonly considered in fire risk assessment systems, basically aims to estimate the potential damages in case of having a fire. And we consider 3 aspects. They are ecosystem services values, the house values, and the ecological values. The ecosystem services that we consider were the one that are in the screen. And basically, in this case, we estimate the values in terms of monetary, so the euros per square kilometer, that was the base unit for that variable. In terms of ecological potential losses, we basically use 3 layers. One, the ecological value that was estimated from biodiversity, the protection, the level of protection areas, the vegetation productivity, and some other variables. That was, let's say, the pre-fire conditions. And these pre-fire conditions would be changed depending on the fire intensity and the coping capacity of vegetation, so the resistance of vegetation to be affected by fire. And also these potential losses would be integrated throughout time by considering the regeneration capability in years. So the idea would be to integrate the losses throughout all the time in which these losses would not be available. That's the fire risk assessment. The second work package is on mitigation strategies, and there we analyze with quite detail the large fires that occurred in Europe for 21, 22, and 23, with a standard methodology that could be useful also for analysis of these large events in the future. And then from these learned lessons, try to avoid or minimize the impacts of those events. Also, we analyze fire behavior conditions in extreme events, which obviously are a combination of different factors, weather conditions, but their own climatology, the fire climatology, the climatology created, let's say, by the actual fire, by the intensity of fire, and also conditions leading to extreme propagation, like canyons or the eruptive condition, junctions, etc. In terms of mitigation strategies, we consider different landscape and fuel management conditions using standard land use models, land use change models. You see the output of that, in which we consider the suitability of the different ways of reducing fuel amounts, fuel loads, herbivory, prescribed burn, and mechanical removal, and the combination of them for the whole European territory. In terms of future conditions, there was two parallel working, one on climate scenarios and the other one on land use change scenarios. The climate scenarios were based on the standard models, let's say, considering the upper and lower range of future simulation. And these both climate and land use models were included in dynamic global vegetation models using the land post-Angena model, and a combination link with a specific module considering fire conditions that is called Spitfire. That leads to future conditions, and then what will be the estimated changes in burn area, considering again both climate and land use conditions that would lead to different fuel properties. For the climate scenarios, as I said, we use different scenarios of the IPCC and different models that would provide, let's say, an uncertainty characterization of future conditions, including the upper and lower bounds. And from that, we estimated the fire weather index, which is a well-known meteorological index, and how this index would change in the future, considering this range of possibilities, different scenarios and different climate models. So you see here the long-term estimation of conditions considering different scenarios. Most, let's say, conservative one, SSP 126, and the most, let's say, pessimistic one, SSP 58. In which the increase, let's say, of fire weather is pretty much extended, but obviously for Central Europe and Northern Europe, the conditions would, let's say, would start being similar to what we experience in some parts of the Mediterranean Europe nowadays. And these future fire conditions, again, implies a combination of climate and land use models, which is very innovative in terms of this type of future adaptation analysis. Well, the general structure of these variables were integrated to use this Spitfire model of the post-Angina dynamic global vegetation. The integrated risk mitigation integrated index was implemented in a computer code that was used for simulating different scenarios of mitigation conditions. We estimate the reduction of 5 variables: the emission probability, the fuel load, the canopy bull density, the coping capacity, and recovery time. And in each case, we analyze what would be the impact for the European territory of reducing any of these factors. I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. Now, the reducing emission by 10%, by 20%, or by 30% would imply a decrease in danger, which would range, let's say, from 0 to -50, depending on the areas and the importance of emission for that particular area in Europe. Obviously, the most historically affected areas by emission would reduce or receive the highest reductions. In terms of fuel loads, reducing fuel load by again 10%, 20%, 30% would imply a reduction in flame length that would be proportional depending on the type of vegetation conditions, whether forests in the Mediterranean areas or non-Mediterranean. You see that the impact is more severe, more evident, even though, of course, in all cases, there is a clear reduction of flame length as a result of having less fuels. In this case, we didn't model how to reduce those fuels because this is a simulation scenario of what would be the most important factors to be considered and to be prioritized in terms of fire risk management. This is a summary of what are the main factors to reduce the overall integration in the risk integration index, assuming in this case 30% of reduction in different factors, and depending on the vegetation type, these are in black. You'll see which is the most important factor and which is the average value in which this risk would be reduced. For instance, applying 30% of reduction in emission probability, or 30% reduction on fuel loss and fuel length, or in gram bull density. So again, these are a very brief summary, of course, because we don't have much time, but a very brief summary of the main achievements that we got within fire risk. Again, I'm putting here this summary, even though we haven't finished yet the project, but I think this could be, let's say, a fairly realistic list of products that we could offer to the fire community. Thank you for your attention. If you have any comments or questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you, Emilio. Thank you, Professor Surienko. Okay, I have a question, but I think we're going to leave it to the end. Okay. Before I introduce our next speaker, I want to say that we're going to send certificates of attendance. Allow us a few days after this webinar, but all you're going to receive them. Now, our next speaker is on behalf of Silvanus, Dr. Krishna Chandramuli, which is the technical coordinator of the project. And he's in charge of the innovation part of Silvanus. He has more than 15 years of research and innovation experience in computer vision technologies, software architecture models, and cybersecurity. So, Krishna, the floor is yours.
I trust you can see my screen, and thank you, Clelia, for the introduction, and to all the participants of the webinar, welcome from our side. And it's a privilege to also share some of the latest innovation outcomes from Silvanus, and it is a privilege also to follow Professor Villegas and also Emilio to follow up some of the technologies that has been developed. Just as a brief context, Silvanus has learned a lot from Fire EU risk research outcomes, and some of the research outcomes have also been integrated. So I'm very grateful for all the support that they have provided us through the years. And it is so fortunate that we are also finishing up the project. So some of the results that you're going to see, mostly all the results that we have developed in the project. And just to highlight the positioning of Silvanus, Silvanus is a technology project. So all the innovations, all the practical demonstration activities, what has been carried out, and how do we translate the highly complex research algorithms and research components into a practical field exercise validation will be the main focus of this presentation. So my name is Krishna Janamali, and I'm the scientific and technical coordinator of Silvanus from Banakat Relief. So if I can go to the next slide. The main aim that when we started Silvanus is to develop technology platform. And today we talk a lot about technology, which is becoming more and more pervasive in the context of using mobile technologies or drone technology, satellite analysis, which Emilio really well articulated, the latest innovation. But while technology does play a role, we also wanted to make sure we take the other two factors into consideration. The first one is the environment that we need to protect. And even more crucially, what is the role of human factors that play in any wildfire ignition? So the combination of these three synergistic and let's say holistic alliance is the main focus of Silvanus. And we are going to talk a lot about three main aspects, the phase A, B, and C. For those who are not in this community, it might seem a bit, let's say, odd. So what do we mean by integrated wildfire management? The first phase, the phase A, what we often refer to in the project, is to emphasize on the prevention and preparedness activities. How do we, as a society, as a small community or region living close to the boundaries of fire, be more prepared to any fire ignition, and what mechanisms we can adopt to prevent or to be more vigilant against any fire ignition. Despite the level of preparedness and prevention activities, we understand that fire sequences are going to happen, and then the question then becomes, what is the most efficient way to respond to a fire ignition? And some of the products that Emilio has already highlighted already has given us a lot of roadmap into what new technologies can deliver. But in Silvanus, we have also carried out specific components and tools that can allow us to better coordinate the response of the firefighters. And the last step, which is often not very well discussed, is the adoption of rehabilitation and restoration activities. And the main question that we asked in the project is to understand, how do we ensure the interventions that has been developed and delivered are resulting in the appropriate long-term monitoring, long-term rehabilitation activities of the forest and restoration activities? What evidence can we collect, and whether this evidence can be quantitative? So those are the boundaries in which Silvanus operated. And as always, as a technology project, we started the idea of Silvanus with data. Where do we get data from? And in what complex sources of information that we can collect data? So that's what you see in this picture, which still basically, let's say, serves as a guiding principle on the type of data sets that we need to collect and aggregate. So starting from the 3D models of the forest to social media sensing for the mobile application, whether it's an online platform where you can report any fire incident, weather and climate models, as we understand, is very crucial. Then how do we engage the citizens? And what do we communicate to the citizens to higher prevention and preparedness activities, earth observation data sources, documents, reports, and especially from the power utilities companies whose lines go through forest regions, and how do we understand regulation and insurance activities? So it's a very broad set of different data sets that we wanted to collect. And more importantly, the use of drones and robots, which we call as the far edge, because these components are basically being deployed in the forest. So where does Sylvanus sit between different data sources, and the far edge components is is in the middle, where we developed a cloud application that I'm going to talk a little bit more in detail, and then support the on-field firefighters and incident commanders with what we call as forward command center. Forward command centers are devices in which the entire, let's say, Sylvanus can be ported, and these devices were then tested and validated to be integrated within the firefighter resources like fire trucks. So they are able to get real-time feedback on the situational awareness on the fire fronts which are being opened up. So taking that idea and the vision, what we then translated the idea into is what you are going to refer to as user products. And this user products is going to be repeated a few more times. So just to ensure, because the complexity of firefighter community is so varied, with the different people having different roles and different expectations, and having a specific action that they need to carry out. So we then took the Sylvanus and broken down into smaller components that are directly dedicated to a particular audience, to a particular user who is going to interact with the platform. And some of the deployment models, what we have developed in the project is also highlighted here. Some are deployed in the cloud, some are deployed in the edge cloud, and some are deployed in the far edge infrastructure. So then the next question then becomes, who are these stakeholders? So for the purposes of the project, again, these are very simplistic assumptions, but you can understand the scalability of these assumptions into practical terms. In the project, we have identified 4 individual stakeholders, and these individual stakeholders are expected to collaborate and coordinate between themselves for every single phase, let's say, phase of the fire prevention, fire detection, response coordination, and rehabilitation. The first user stakeholder we identified is the Civil Protection Authority, who at a very, let's say, at a high level, is overseeing any prevention activities and make sure that forest region is kept pristine, and they would be in a position to promote the prevention and preparedness activities against any wildfire incidents. Then comes the foresters and researchers who are actively involved in the in the development of landscape management activities, and also to develop policies and identify how the biodiversity of a forest can be preserved. How do we strengthen the forest in protecting against or improving the resilience of the forest itself? So that community of researchers and foresters will provide knowledge about the state of the forest and landscape management activities, etc. The third one is the firefighters, who play the most crucial role in the overall coordination of the firefighter community. And for them, what do we need to provide? And one feedback we continuously received is, do not overwhelm us with too much information. Keep it simple, keep it clear, so we understand what we need to perform, because we cannot spend, when I say we, the firefighters told us that they cannot spend any amount of time processing data or understanding data. They wanted a simple interface to understand what is the status now, what is the next forecast is going to be, where should I deploy my resources, especially fire trucks, water cannons, etc. And that input was such a meaningful insight for us, and we have, I hope we have done justice, and I'm sure we'll see some results towards the end of the presentation. In combination to these 3 stakeholders, the 4th key stakeholder are the citizens. And this citizen engagement has been one of the, let's say, proud accomplishment, because we understand citizens' involvement and in protecting the forest is a crucial activity. And within Sylvanus, we also developed an entire citizen engagement coursework that we can that we have published in open source, in open platforms. And this actually articulates the role the citizens play and how the citizens can be a part of fire prevention activities across all 3 phases. Now, the next question is, how do we establish collaboration between these 4 stakeholders? And when do the collaboration should start, and what time should it end? And does it even end? Now, this slide identifies we start at March, in the month of March, and go all the way up to October. But this is again, in the context of the project activities, we align this timeline along with our internal timeline. But in practical cases, there is no starting point, end point for any activities that we present here. It can be an all year round activities. And then we establish there needs to be cross collaboration between different stakeholders. And this is not just one-off activity. And in the project of Sylvanus, we also engaged and delivered a continuous integration or collaboration among these 4 stakeholders throughout the duration of the project period. And in the next slides, I will be explaining what this looks like. So then the next question is, you have all these technologies, you have the stakeholders. So where do we start? What do we monitor? And how do we keep monitoring the state of the environment? To accomplish this, okay, we said, let's start with identifying the state of the forest. What does a forest represent? And how do we understand the metrics, the quantitative metrics that allow us to estimate or predict and better be prepared where the fire ignition potentially could take place, which is also what Emilio has presented. So in this context, the first user product, which is delivered to a civil protection authority, is the fire weather index. And in combination to that, we also develop fire ignition models, which is more statistical algorithms that were developed. And the aim is this user product combined will give us a map, let's say a map architecture where you can actually see this changing nature of the threat of the forest that can potentially come under fire ignitions. Now, in order to compute this metric, we also have developed a Uday application, which is to identify the biodiversity of the profile in which let's say the analysis is being carried out. What is the different tree species that are being present? And are they resilient to fire? Are they vulnerable to fire? What are their characteristics, the fire characteristics that they exhibit? And combination to that, as I said, citizens are going to be a part of every single activity that we identify to be implemented. And thus we developed 3 user products in this context. 2 of them relate to citizen engagement program to raise awareness and knowledge on the potential contributions citizens can make towards fire prevention activities. And of course, social media sensing is to identify if and when a fire ignition report is being presented to the social media platform, we have the technology to gather this information and process it. And every block, you also see the databases. This ideally represents all the information that we are able to collect throughout the pilot activities. And we have been able to generate a significant portion of data throughout the duration of the project. And at each point in time, all the interactions with the platform has been logged and recorded. And we also see how we use this for improving the platform performance. Now that we understand the region's fire threat based on the fire ignition model, then we want to engage with the firefighters and prepare them to be alert and ready to respond to any potential fire ignition. Now, it is not always the case that it is possible to be prepared, and especially the fire incidents that are taking place in the wild is so challenging because of the sudden change in the weather patterns can change the direction of the fire, for which we have seen fantastic demonstration in the laboratories in the and the case studies that was produced by Fire Risk. So we use that knowledge to generate AR, VR training systems that will realistically simulate an environment which the firefighters are being exposed to continuously to be adaptive and be able to make a change or have safety engagement for the any potential fire actions that you need to take into account. So this partly represents the prevention and preparedness activities. On the other hand, based on the measure of the forest, based on the measure of the alerts and the potential dangers of the incident, the Fire Civil Protection Authority is also able to then increase the area of surveillance. And for surveillance, we use the UAVs, especially with the drone incidents. And more importantly, what we developed in the project is an on-field or on-demand IoT devices that you can simply, let's say, wrap around a tree. And these devices can start to monitor the state of the forest and detect any smoke or any potential fire incidents at a very early stage. And these devices are so small and compatible, and these can be deployed as and when a particular threat of a region increases. And this will then allow us to continuously stay in the loop and be aware and create any alert that will potentially result in a fire incident. And until and unless the fire incident takes place, we don't have to go to the next stage. But when a fire incident is being detected, that's where the coordination of the activities that are required, which means we first identify the potential fire spread based on the use of AI algorithms and machine learning models that can potentially predict and forecast the fire spread, not only for the first, let's say, time period of a few minutes, but also has the ability to go up to a period of, let's say, a couple of hours. That knowledge on the potential expected spread will then allow us to identify where effectively or where efficiently the resources that are available, which we understand is always going to be constrained. We will never have sufficient resources in case of a fire incident, should be deployed. And that DSS component is a very big block that has so many sub-components integrated, which is also why you see the .x, because it's a lot of different components that are integrated that basically allows us to identify where the resources should be placed, until what time a specific evacuation routes are being allowed or be acceptable for any evacuation activities, and to deploy this entire decision support system not only in the cloud but also in the Sylvanus forward command center. Now, one of the biggest challenges that we overcame in the project is to establish communication and coordination on the field that will allow information to be propagated, to be transmitted between multiple forward command center through the proprietary model of mesh in the sky, which effectively allows the use of proprietary signal processing mechanisms to transmit data. And all of this information is then continuously monitored by different stakeholders in the cloud. And this entire process will be continuously, let's say, carried out until the entire fire is extinguished and there's a safety reason, or let's say a safe zone that is being established. And the last part of this entire cycle is the decision support system for forest ecological resilience and recovery activities, which again involves a lot of engagement with the foresters, with the Civil Protection Authority, with the citizens, to ensure there is more investment, more rehabilitation strategies that will really allow us to help us with improving the quality of the landscape resilience going forward. So that is the overall approach in a systematic way, taking into account the preparedness activities, detection, and prevention, and restoration rehabilitation activities. And all of these activities are time bound. So every incident or every component that produces a result is also time stamped. And this actually allows us to keep check and keep monitoring how the progress of the fire incident is being potentially identified and mitigated. Now, this is a screenshot of what we have developed so far in the project, which has been continuously tested and validated across different pilot areas. This platform was the second version of the platform released was achieved in September 2025. Just to briefly summarize, on the left-hand side, you see a lot of layers, and each of these layers represents a component and algorithm that executes data analysis and then generates a result. The pins that you see here corresponds to a specific infrastructure that is available within the platform. And the red region you see is the forecast model. And you also see potential evacuation routes that are not anymore safe, or that are not safe anymore for any potential firefighters to, let's say, use, and also for citizens. And this communication regarding the evacuation route safety is also being communicated and shared with respective citizens through the citizen engagement app. So for every region that for every data that you see here, you also have evidence to ensure where the data is being collected, when this information was identified, and where this, what is the metadata that is associated to how the firefighters should interpret the information that they see here on their screen. So the question then became, how do we present this project to the end user? And one approach that we adopted is to simply allow the end users to have a question in mind based on the need, based on the necessity of what they would like to have the Sylvanus give them answers to. So some of these questions, I'm not going to go through all in detail, but just to give you a flavor of what type of challenges that we considered. As a civil protection authority, the question that could be asked, and we were asked this question, can you identify areas of higher fire danger? And for that, we asked one of the technology partners who is listed here to then provide an answer, which directly corresponds to the use of fire danger index. And not only to say this is the fire danger index, but also to explain in detail how the fire danger index is computed, what does it mean for the respective civil protection authority, and how do we interpret the data? Because when you forecast, when you predict information, there is no guarantee that it's going to happen, but we can be accurate in our assessment and taking into account an action based on the forecast will have to minimize the threat of the forecast. For example, based on the fuel load, if the forecast is high and if the civil protection authority takes an action to remove the fuel, then the forecast has to minimize or has to take into account the change in the nature. And this actually led us to then develop the component, the fire weather index model, to continuously being executed on a weekly basis or bi-weekly basis to then show to the stakeholder how their action is being reflected, and this actually enhanced our collaboration with the stakeholders. Similarly, if collecting biodiversity data is quite challenging because of the changing nature of the fire, the landscape, the climate change, and also some migration patterns of invading tree species. So always the environment is also evolving. So is there a way to better collect the knowledge and promote this information and document the effective biodiversity metric? And for this, we developed let's say a mobile application with the AI model that will automatically classify the different tree species and gives a better visualization of the metrics and the quantification of different families and genus and other parameters. And lastly, can we improve the training of the firefighters before even they are being exposed to high risk areas? So this is where the AR, VR training played a very key role, and the content creation part was presented by the partner. So the same was approached and same approach was taken into account. How do we engage citizens, and as citizens, what questions they may have asked? And here are some responses in the context of having the citizen engagement app that will allow us to, let's say, give feedback or learn about the forest fire. Now you will notice I'm talking a lot about the questions and not the answers, and that's because all our answers are in our Sylvanus website. So I welcome you to take a look at our website and have all these answers. And if you don't find any specific answer, please feel free to reach out to us. Going forward, in terms of technology development, what does an early warning system look like, and how easy it is for a firefighter to deploy these early warning systems? And for that, we have the specific user product that was developed. And similarly, how do we alert the citizens? How can we use social media sensing to generate automatic alerts? And as the situation increases or the threat level increases and the incidents are being detected, what is the effective way to use drones? And how do we map the pilot area of or let's say the drone flight path into a system and get the images from the drone mapped to the specific geolocation? This will then help us to estimate and analyze the severity of the fire incident. And for that, we also developed a lot of AI components and models. And lastly, if you want to identify the potential spread of a fire, given these conditions, what would it look like? These are the examples that you have also seen in the visualization, what I presented before. And of course, how do you allocate resources and to make sure you first save lives and also the forest layer, forest assets, and where can we show and see this information? All this is presented in the GIS platform. So I'm just going to go through all this in detail, but you can see the level of detail that we have to go through to understand the finer details of conducting a field assessment, field analysis, and to coordinate between all these different partners in order to achieve a pilot exercise. which incorporated the entire technology developed, entire set of technologies that were developed in the project. And these are, again, the in-situ devices and the bad air quality, because air quality also plays a very key role in analyzing the health of the health of the citizens and also the firefighters. So we have done this approach, and making sure that there is cross communication between two fire fronts, two forward command centers. They can exchange information to avoid overcrowding on common paths, which was also a crucial, let's say, outcome in order to minimize any undue or any congestion that takes place when safely evacuating citizens. And the last one is, can I get long-term visual analysis of the ecosystem management? I mean, this was the question that we were asked by the foresters, researchers, who wanted to understand if the recommended landscape management practices are yielding the right result. So Silvanus was a 3.5-year project, and we understand that for any meaningful restoration activities, we need a long period of time. So these systems are being developed with the expectation there will be an uptake among the Civil Protection Authority and forester community to continue monitoring the specific pilot sites. So that then allowed us all these different questions and stakeholder engagements and coordinating the development of the platform and delivery, then allowed us to simplify 4 lines of defense that we can establish in the protection of forest fires. I mean, protection of forest against wildfires. The first line of defense, all the IoT devices and the innovation that we are able to see from the use of IoT devices that can be deployed on the field with low energy cost, and the use of Earth observation data sources and the weather stations can really allow us to develop a very detailed information about the state of the environment. And this continued monitoring allowed us to identify if there is a fire incident that is being detected or reported or in any form, use the drones to then conduct an inspection. The drones then provide us with high detailed overview on the severity and the state of the fire. Then you have the deployment of the robots with the water dispersal capacity. And the 4th line is the deployment of the water bombs. Now, I know that this seems like in a sequence, but from our pilot experience, any one of these 4 layers can be can be matched and can be conducted or can be carried out in whichever form the firefighters and the incident commanders see it fit. So this is our understanding of Silvanus delivering different features, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it needs to be sequential in the execution. So how did we validate our entire approach? We did we conducted a significant amount of exercise starting from June all the way up to October in conducting a field exercise in which all of this coordination of different technologies, different platforms, project components were evaluated. And this also this was also participated by many technology partners and stakeholders. So we showed a lot of collaboration between the different firefighter members and the technology providers to better validate and evaluate the outcome of the project results. So we are in the last few months of the project. Next month is our last period. So we have successfully conducted 2 iterative cycles of project validation and evaluation. And after March, Silvanus will not cease to exist. I would like to take the moment and opportunity to also explain. We as a consortium have developed or have taken the commitment to establish a Center for Adaptation Strategies and Sustainability. This is a knowledge transfer center, and all the knowledge that we developed in the project Silvanus will be made available as case studies, as reports, as training objectives and training activities. So please do support us and ensure that we are in a much better position to collaborate in the future, ensuring that this knowledge, what was developed in Silvanus, continues to live and see its day in light. And we continue to develop the technology to better equip and provide support for the firefighters and all the stakeholders that I have identified and discussed. So with that, I would like to take the opportunity to also thank all the partners. I know I'm only one person sitting here, in this role, but we are supported by 49 partners in the consortium. And also want to thank the European Commission for giving us the funding, which has helped us to let's say bring together all the members from 15 European member states and the 3 international countries which are represented on the bottom right, which is Australia, Indonesia, and Brazil. So Silvanus, as Fire EU Risk is a huge consortium, so I want to also thank everyone on their behalf as well, and also please join us and support us and continue the conversation and discussion in protecting nature and protecting against wildfire. Thank you.
Thank you, Krishna. Wow, amazing. And we are on time, everybody. That's great. Okay, we have some questions, which some of them are already answered inside the Q&A. I'll ask if Professor Villegas has some words to say, and then I'll go through. If anything hasn't been answered, I will read it through. So Villegas, any comments?
Thank you very much, Clelia. I'd like again to compliment Krishna and of course Emilio for their presentations, and to greet everyone that is on board in this meeting. It is great to see the interest that there is in the results of these projects, because it's very important to many people. I believe that in the audience we have people from not only from different countries, but also from different backgrounds that are interested in the problem. And all that was said about these 2 projects, I think they are complementary and they are very important. As you could see in Fire Risk Project, we were looking more or less at the concepts and the processes, at the understanding of them, and looking at the problem as a whole. Trying to promote guidelines, but also looking into detail to some of the aspects that are involved in the wildfires. And we are happy that we were able to produce some innovative and some original approaches and visions to the problem. And we are also happy to see that they are being followed. I was very touched by the words of Krishna, who said that the results of our project are being used by Silvanus, and I know that also other researchers are following us, and this is what we would like to achieve. And also, as we are now reaching the end of the life of the projects, we of course would like to know that the results that we have produced will stay after the end of the project. We are working with not only with the other projects to make sure that our products are presented strongly, but they are also presented in a way that other institutions can use them and can continue follow what we did. And for this, I think this sort of webinars is very important, because I already see in the comments that have been made that this type of activities, this type of dissemination, this work should be continued, and we will try to do our best on this. And I'm sure that with the help of all the research community and also of the stakeholders, we will achieve this. What we saw is that the Silvanus project is more on the presentation of technical solutions, technological solutions, which are very important nowadays, because the problem is very complex. The problem of managing wildfires is very complex, and we need to bring on board every support that we can on this. And for that, I also compliment our colleagues from Silvanus for what they have developed and achieved. I was able to attend at least one of the demos that was done here in Portugal, and I could see how they are working on producing these results. Maybe the time is not sufficient to accomplish and to finish all of them, but I think that this is a process that should be ongoing. That's all, Karen.
Thank you, Professor Villegas. I would like to read one question that is in the chat, and then there is a new question in the Q&A, actually. So I'll read first the one in the chat, has been there a few moments. Virginia Murray is asking, just wondering if you have included the issues around health and safety of firefighters and the impacts on public health of wildfires. If you might be interested in sharing more, then please contact me. It's giving her email. Krishna, go ahead.
Oh, sorry. I think Professor Villegas want to say something.
Yes.
Yes, Professor Villegas, please.
Thank you. But Krishna, you go
No,
ahead.
no, please go ahead.
Okay, thank you.
I heard Krishna.
I'm sorry. I thought that the question was already answered, but I would be pleased to say a few words about that. Of course, the health of the firefighters is very important for us, not only of firefighters, but the whole citizens, because we see that now more and more the wildfires affect the whole communities. And regarding the health, we are looking at two aspects in the fire risk: the smoke dispersion, so how smoke that is produced by the fires can affect the people in the short distance, let's say with acute episodes, or also in the long distance, in the long duration exposure to smoke. That is one problem that is very important, and we know, and it is not very well studied, that the smoke has great impact. There are many loss of lives due to this. But we are also looking at other aspect, that is of the safety of the people, because the wildfire let's say propagation actually affects immediately, again, not only firefighters, but also citizens. Actually, these days I've been working in the field, analyzing a very large fire that occurred in Portugal last September, and an accident that occurred also, in which 3 firefighters were killed in the accident, and 4 civilians were killed in a fire. And I was studying this, and I think that we have still to learn and to understand many more things about how these events develop, and especially how people think about them, how people anticipate their activities and how they take decisions. I can say that, of course, this is a preliminary, but all the 4 deaths that occurred in the fire were due to the people trying to save their goods, a car or a vehicle or something like that. And for that, 4 people lost their lives in different incidents. These are things that we have to better understand. Of course, we have to look at the health and the smoke and all those effects, but we have to look at the whole process and to the people, first of all. Okay, that's.
Thank you. I completely agree. And I will also follow up by saying, in the project Silvanus, we developed a component called health impact assessment, which effectively measures in quantified terms the toxicity in the atmosphere, the pollutants that is being exposed. And this device is a part of the forward command center. So we are able to monitor the changing nature of the quality of the air in the atmosphere. And we don't have the a strong medical team supporting us. I mean, we have 2 partners, but their contributions are quite minimal, and they have allowed us to evaluate the effect on the firefighter in a short-term exposure time period. But you are right, Virginia. I think we definitely need to expand the scope of long-term monitoring of firefighters who are continuously being exposed. And then I think at least having the ability using IoT devices to measure the metric, like to quantify what is the exposure of a firefighter in the vicinity and how toxic or how different components and substances are available in the air or changing in the air is already a good starting point for us. So again, I would say that we have a health impact assessment component. And in the next 2 weeks webinar, we are also going to talk a little bit about impact assessment framework. So today we talk about technology, but in the next one, we are also going to say whether the technology that we developed have worked and what type of quantification we need to understand what progress we have made in terms of research and what would be the roadmap for the future to continue such engagement with the community. But thank you for the question.
Thank you. Okay, another question which has a follow-up. from David Green is, can you say more about how simplified you needed to make results for firefighters to learn and agree to change their practice prevention? I think, Krishna, this goes to you, and I'll jump those as I'm talking to the second one. Are there guidelines from the same person? Are there guidelines and outlines on how to reproduce the field exercise that can be shared?
Yes.
So I think I'll give the word to Krishna, but I think on the guidelines we have also something in Fire Juris that we just completed, and I'll give the word to Professor Villegas or Professor Rivengo if they want to reply. Krishna, go ahead.
So for the first question, thanks, David, for the question. The simplified nature is simply to say, show us a visualization that we understand and try to not overwhelm with information. So the information that the GIS system that we presented has a lot of layers. The problem is if you activate all the layers, it is overwhelming for the user because of the different pins, different way, the icons that we use to represent different structures, whether it's a IoT device, whether it's a health impact assessment, the forward command center that is being deployed, it becomes overwhelming. So what we enabled in the platform is to switch on and off a specific layer. Then the firefighter has the full autonomy and control to know what information they would like to have what information they would like to visualize and whether that information is highly relevant for them at that particular time period. One example is the evacuation route map. So if the evacuation route map is not relevant anymore, they can simply switch it off and rerun the algorithm, rerun the module, which will then simply show a blue line instead of giving more complex information. So for any additional, I hope I answered the question, but if you have any other clarification, you can feel free to reach us.
Professor Villegas?
Thank you, Clelia. I would also like to say a word about these guidelines or simplified guidelines. In the fire risk project, one of the deliverables that we produced was guidelines for the training of firefighters in addressing wildfires with extreme behavior. And in it, we tried to put all the knowledge that we were able to gather, not only from our research, but also from what exists in the literature, and give indications, let's say, about the basics of this extreme fire behavior, and that every firefighter, even young firefighters, should know, and what would be the precautions that they should take, and what actions they should avoid to not to put themselves in danger. As I said, that is our main purpose, to enhance the safety of the people. Of course, we also try to give guidelines to address the very complicated problem of fighting fires in the wild and urban interface. And we also develop some guidelines for this. Okay, this is important, but I think that what we did in the project in Fire and Risk, and I would like to invite Emilio to comment a bit on this, is not to work only with the decision makers in the field, but also at a high level, let's say, to assess the risk of fire and what policies can be followed to reduce this risk. And this is something that we built a platform in which the stakeholders can work and play with the different parameters and learn from them. I don't know, Emilio, if you want to comment a bit on this.
Yeah, thank you, Domingos. Well, I would say that our main emphasis is not so much on suppression, but on fire risk assessment. So pre-fire conditions is what we have emphasized in the project. I think there are many people in Europe that recognizes that suppression is obviously very important, but it's not the main thing in fire management. So we need to make additional efforts in determining fire risk conditions and trying to be adapted also to different changes in socioeconomic structure in the countryside, but climate also variables. And therefore, I think we need to complement the historical efforts in fire suppression with more efforts on fire risk assessment, mitigation, and that implies a more structural, let's say, type of analysis that is basically permanent. It does go beyond the particular emergency situations. But obviously, when we have an emergency situation, if we have done, let's say, an appropriate analysis of risk conditions, then obviously the impacts of these extreme fires would be much reduced. That was one of our policies, to emphasize more fire risk assessment rather than fire suppression.
Thank you. May I say that the guidelines that Professor Villegas has explained and has briefly talked through, they have been translated as well in different countries, in different, other than English, it was the original deliverable. I think we have it in Spanish, Portuguese, and now Romanian. I'm not, I might be wrong on that, but we will upload everything on our website as soon as we have everything concluded. And okay, I was gonna type the question, but I'm gonna ask it. Krishna already replied. Did any of the national authorities in civil protection participated in any of the projects, Fire Jurist and Silvanus? May I reply for Fire Jurist, but Professor Villegas, Professor Villegas can please add more comments that throughout the project, we had firefighters, civil protection, policymakers commenting, giving their feedback. We have an end users board forum, which we were presenting our process, our research, where we wanted to get through, and now we're presenting the results. And they were also participating in our pilot sites. So we had all the, let's say, interaction and change of opinions and taking from their experience and their needs throughout the development of the project.
Well, if I may add, in the case of fire risk, we even had some national agencies as partners. I remember the case of Romania and Portugal. We had the Civil Protection Authority, this Forest Service as partners, and also the National Meteorology Agency as a partners. So there was a great interconnection. And as Clelia said, in the different pilot sites and demos, we interacted very much with the national and regional agencies, depending on the country, and there was this involvement. Of course, this could be always more, let's say, intense, but I think we tried to do, and there was a great dialogue, particularly in the demonstration actions, but throughout the project. And we also had a board that in the fire risk we called the observatory, that was composed by personalities from different backgrounds, who worked with us, giving us their assessment on the way we were leading the research, and they gave us advice, for example, how to, or where we should go, what they would expect, what were the expectations of some particular aspects of their work, and we continue to work with them throughout the project.
Okay. And one last, and then we can close down. There is a comment on the chat in Portuguese. I'm not gonna try to read it through. If it was Spanish, I would have tried, but not in Portuguese. I don't know if there is a question or just a comment. I mean, if you wanna have a look, Professor Villegas or Luis Mario, and with this we can close the session. May I remind you, we have another webinar on the 14th of February, same time, a bit longer, as we are many participants, and it's a another interesting subject to analyze through. Thank you for being here. Any reply on the or is it just a comment? Did you see the?
It's mainly a comment, Clara.
Okay, great. Thank you for that, Luis Mario. Thank you, Professor Chuvienko, Krishna Chanduri, Dr. Krishna Chanduri for being here, Professor Villegas, always thank you for supporting these actions of collaboration and for all the time spending on preparing and presenting. Luis Mario for the organization and everybody else. I'll see you all next Friday. Have a nice day.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.